David, how are you?
I'm really good. It's another surprise sunny day in Los Angeles, so I'm happy.
We are at the time of recording. We're the week of the U.S. holiday Thanksgiving, and I'm curious if you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving. I know that your origin story did not begin in this country, but I'm curious if you're going to celebrate with the country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm flattered that I've gotten invited to some Thanksgivings. It's something we don't do in New Zealand at all. Like, we don't do Halloween, and I know that's a huge thing here, and we definitely don't do Thanksgiving. So, yeah, I'm sort of, it's awkward now because I'm choosing between a few different Thanksgivings and also Friendsgiving, which is a thing that I hadn't heard of, which is like a bonus festival just for friends. So I like the origins of Thanksgiving are incredibly questionable, but I like the idea of eating a lot of food.
Okay, let's start. Listen, I have followed your work for a long time. I love how your mind works. And in some respects, you are like a social grenade. I think you walk into a social setting, you pull the pin, the thing gets said, people look at you sideways, and you're really good at getting straight to the truth of things. And so the origins of Thanksgiving are incredibly questionable. Yes. I'd love to hear your take on that. Let's start there.
Oh, well, I mean, I think, America is an incredibly divided place at the moment, and obviously race plays into that a lot. And yeah, I guess as a white person who's gone through their life with a pretty privileged, I've had a pretty privileged lot thus far. And so, when you look at how this nation was founded and how the original custodians of this place I am now, America, are treated currently, Thanksgiving, it's a lot less appealing than the sharing of food and friendship makes out. I was talking to some friends a couple of weeks ago and was incredibly surprised to learn that, they were probably my age. They were sort of mid to late 30s. And at school, before the Thanksgiving break, they'd all dress up as pilgrims and be told this really watered down history of how America came to be. And I think it's only recently we're having these discussions, not just in the United States, but we're having them in New Zealand as well, looking at history a little bit more honestly and how a lot of the original inhabitants of these colonized countries have been treated and where that has left all of us now.
Let's go to your origin story. I want to know a little bit about how you're growing up. And we don't need to spend too much time, but just from a framework perspective, like it's a little bit of a backstop. What was it like growing up? I want to know what was capturing your attention when you're younger. And I also want to know, like, what was the dinner table or breakfast table like? What were the conversations like with the family?
I grew up in New Zealand, which is a very far away from where I am right now in the States. And I came over here about 6 months ago, and I was meaning to go back to New Zealand, but they closed the border to keep COVID out. So I'm kind of stranded here at the moment. Happily stranded. I like being here, and I find America pretty fascinating. But my upbringing, I was one of two children. I've got an older brother. I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian home. So I think, my family I had a great upbringing. There was no I think when you bring up conservative Christianity, people sort of might think, oh, what was that like? I had a great time. I had a really good, my dad was a veterinarian. I love animals. That's thanks to my dad. Every animal under the sun would end up in our house. And so I had a pet goat at one point, which would follow me to school that I'd literally tie up outside the school gates when I went in. It was like a very idyllic childhood, like cats. And we had like chickens and had a dog and different parrots and parakeets. So I had a great upbringing. I think one thing that did play into where I went later in my life is I had a pretty narrow worldview, and that was a pretty religious worldview. I was raised in a certain form of Christianity that didn't allow for a lot of nuance in the way I viewed the world. And so I think when I left for university and started to fall away from that belief system, I was just kind of delighted about the types of people that existed in the world and the different belief systems and the different ways that people live their life. And so I really leant heavily into that. And I think where I went in my documentary work from that was leaning into some of the more, I guess, left field groups, whether it was, I started in pop culture journalism and I was drawn to like metal music because it was such a different set of people. And I love subcultures and subgroups. And I think a lot of that was from having an upbringing where it was pretty narrow and I had, my friends and my school and my family all believe the same thing. And I'm sort of delighted now. I mean, the best thing about being alive, I think, is just the huge array of different ways we can live this life. And I think that's like fascinating, and I think it should be celebrated.
That's probably what led to your interest in expanding and pushing up against the edges of tourism and different worldviews and the way people organize their free time. And so I would like to hit on that series that you did. And the meat of what I want to talk about is conspiracy theory. And so where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Dark Tourist, or do you want to start with conspiracy theory?
We can talk about Dark Tourist because that was a show that I made, I suppose, before I started writing extensively about conspiracy theory culture. And yeah, it was a blast. And it's sort of an interesting thing to talk about that documentary series now at a time when we kind of haven't been able to travel as much. So it kind of feels exciting to revisit that in a way.
Quick flyover is that you identified how many episodes? Was it
we did 8 episodes.
8? I was going to say 8 or 10. So 8 episodes where you went to places that like were right on the fringe. Name a few of them to get a flavor for folks that don't know what it is.
I mean, we traveled all over the place. We were in Kazakhstan. We visited various places in Japan. We're all around
Chernobyl.
Europe. It was Fukushima, actually. We're in Fukushima.
Yeah,
we wanted to go to Chernobyl, but we ended up choosing to cover the nuclear tourism found in Fukushima. And I guess the idea of Dark Tourist was that, there's this area of tourism which is the opposite to what you expect. Instead of going to a beautiful beach or, going to some wonderful idyllic place, there's a certain subset of travelers that want to push what they see and what they do. And so they travel to places basically where something terrible has happened. And, morally, this threw up a bunch of really interesting questions because often a lot of people traveling are traveling from a place of privilege and suddenly, disaster tourism comes into this. And, should we be traveling to these places where awful things have happened for our own? Is it education or is it entertainment? So these are the kinds of things we were wanting to look at. And, it led to some pretty fascinating places. I mean, the favorite episode for me, I think, was probably the most morally sort of compromised episode, which was meeting Pablo Escobar's hitman, Popeye. And narco tourism is this big thing where, popularized in large part at the time due to Narcos on Netflix, and people were suddenly invigorated by Pablo Escobar and his story, and so people would flood to these different locations from Narcos, the TV show, which were also locations in reality. And so ended up spending some time with Popeye, and this is a man that had killed over 300 people. He had executed his pregnant girlfriend. I will literally never meet anyone. I'd be very surprised if I ever met anyone in the rest of my life that was as morally objectionable to Popeye. And yet he was also, and I'm curious what your take is on this, he was also incredibly charismatic, and I felt safe around him. I felt zero danger, despite him objectively being the most dangerous person I'll ever meet. And he was carrying a gun at the time. I don't know what would have annoyed him. Obviously, things annoyed him in the past. But he was a highlight of the show for me because I got to quiz this guy about what made him tick and why he did the things he did and how he saw himself. He's dead now from cancer, but he how he saw himself in society, a lot of which hated him for what he had done.
I've got 3 questions.
Hit me.
Yeah. How did you get up on the edge to ask him the dangerous questions? The dangerous question would be one of intimacy. It would be one of truth and honesty, which might not hold up his public image, right? So there's the marketing mind that he would have to know who he is in the world around him, and he needs to hold up that image of being an absolute psychopath, right? A controlled psychopath. So how did you do that? And in an honest conversation between you and I, did you go to the edge, or did you hold back because of your own fears?
I think it was a bit of both. There was one point during the conversation where I said to him, just very like point blank, you executed your girlfriend and your unborn child. And that
by the way, I loved when you asked that. I was like, oh God, like, how is he going to respond?
Well, yeah, I had to bring it up because the thing is, I couldn't spend time with him and put him on screen and just sort of treat him as a wacky, eccentric person that he is. Like, I had to I felt in that moment, and I wasn't expecting to say that, but I had to sort of just confront this one symbolic thing, which, he killed 300 people, yes, but I think that very visceral thing of executing his girlfriend and child was just this visceral thing that needed to be stated. And I wanted him to have to sort of awkwardly grapple with that a little bit in the moment. And the joy with shooting documentary is cameras are on him, cameras are on me, and you get that whole awkwardness and weirdness of that scenario. And I think, yeah, it was awkward and it was weird. But in saying that, I wasn't there alone with him. When you're filming, I had a translator there for one thing. So language, in a way, was a safety net for me, because I would ask that question to his face, but it would go via a translator. And I think that made it easier for me to do that. And I think it was a less brave way for me to communicate. If we were speaking the same language, then that may have been more difficult to do, I think. And then the added thing, one of my best friends was there filming that. I know him from New Zealand. I knew our sound operator. We had a producer there. So there were people there. And I think sometimes the things, and maybe I shouldn't talk myself down, but sometimes when you seem brave or on camera, it's you are surrounded by a team, and they are brave also, and there's safety in numbers. So that also gives me the bravado to do some of that stuff and to ask some of those questions.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. To answer your question, are you familiar with the dark triad? It's a psychological theory.
I've run into it a little bit in my conspiracy theory ramblings, but please refresh me, because I think it says a lot.
Yeah, so the dark triad is a personality cluster where somebody represents 3 very dark personality traits. One is Machiavellianism, so the ability to really be clever in the way that you are bringing people around for your own gain, right? So there's a Machiavellianism, psychopathology, which speaks for itself, and then narcissism. And so people of the dark triad are very dangerous, potentially violent, but very dangerous because it's all about them. They can woo you in, make you feel a certain way, but they have the psychopathology, which is the absolute ultimate game that they play, is whenever they get backed into a corner, they'll just flip the chessboard. So you can't really work with psychopaths in a constructive way because of the outburst and the violent, and the nature of which they work from is different than 99 point whatever % of the population. But you take all 3 of those as a cluster, and he was probably just that. And the cameras fed the narcissism. The Machiavellianism was the kind of the swoon that he was able to help you love him, and then or not love him, but there was a lot of affection there. He was, I have good memories of him. And then the psychopathology is, you don't know what you're going to get, And so it's a long way of answering your question.
Yeah, and I find being around these people fascinating. I mean, I think, in you know, there's a documentary I can't talk about much right now because I'm sort of finishing it off. But I think I'm spending a lot of time with someone that has at least two of those traits, and I think just to be in the presence of someone like that, it's just fascinating because it's like being in a way with an alien. They think in such a different way to you, and it's just so there's such a disconnect there, and you occasionally will connect on little points, but largely you won't. Like, they're just marching to the beat of their own drum. And yeah, it's sort of terrifying and fascinating at the same time, but something in me really likes spending time with those sorts of people, mainly partly because they make for a good story, perhaps, but I think part of me does just like how fucking weird it is.
Okay, I want to take a quick little break right here to talk about Masterclass. It's that time of year, and they're giving a special give one, get one offer. And it's back on the table here with Masterclass. You can learn from world's best minds anytime, anywhere, at your own pace. That's what they do. They've got over 100 classes from a range of world-class instructors. So that thing that you've wanted to get better at, or that thing that you wanted to explore, they've probably got a course on that. I've loved my experience of taking countless classes over the past few years. And one of the recent ones that I enjoyed was Gordon Ramsay, the chef. I mean, he's got gems of insights on cooking. It's something I enjoy. I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy learning. And so I want to encourage you to check that class out. So this holiday, give one annual membership and get one free is what they're offering. So go to masterclass.com/findingmastery today to check it out. So that's masterclass.com/findingmastery. Terms apply. And Finding Mastery is also brought to you by Babel. Learning a new language, it can feel intimidating. At least for me, it does. And when I first decided to give Spanish a shot, I was concerned about the level of difficulty, the time commitment I was going to have to make, and, how my accent sounded out loud. Those are the narratives in my head there. But thanks to Babel, the #1 selling language learning app, the whole process was fun, fast, it was easy. What they do, Babel teaches bite-sized language lessons for real-world use. With Babel, you can choose from 14 different languages: Spanish, French, Italian, German, so on and so forth. They've also got a speech recognition technology that helps you improve your pronunciation and your accent. So there are so many ways that you can learn with Babel. They've got you covered here. In addition to lessons, you can access podcasts, games, videos, stories, and even live classes. Plus, it comes with a 20-day money-back guarantee. So right now, when you purchase a 3-month Babel subscription, you get an additional 3 months for free. So that's 6 months for the price of 3. Just go to babbel.com and use the promo code MASTERY. So that's Babel, BABBEL.com, and then use the code MASTERY. Babel, language for life. And now let's get right back into our conversation. Oh yeah, I mean, the most manipulative, the most selfish, the most charismatic, and the quote unquote most crazy, And so, yeah, that's a good subject for, for a lot of reasons. Oh goodness. Okay. When you were on the, how do you pronounce it? McKinney Manor?
McCamey Manor. McCamey Manor.
Oh my God. People, I want to encourage folks to go watch just that episode. When I watched you get geared up for that, I thought, oh my God, David is a madman. I love David for his, his ability to get right on the edge. Cause I would say, I think of myself in many lights that way. And I was second guessing myself in that episode the entire time. As soon as they put that thing in your mouth, the dentist, whatever contraption that opens your jaw up, I was like, I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, well, it was a, McCamey Manor is, I guess it's an extreme haunt would be a charitable way to describe it. It's, it's a guy, Russ McCamey, who possibly is in that triad himself, and would openly possibly admit that. But he basically is a one-man horror show, and he will invite you, there's a huge waiting list for this thing. his haunt. And the haunt is basically just him finding different ways to torture you, and the idea is that you get through to the other side. It's torture.
Yeah, this isn't haunt like ghosts and goblins and monsters jump out around corners. This is true torture.
No, he'll waterboard
terror.
you, or he'll trap you in a freezer with water and lock it. He's got a mechanism that he'll, almost like a fish bowl, that he can like lock around your neck, so you're sort of in the bowl with water. He is really good psychologically at preying on your fears, and I didn't get very far at all, but the first thing he did was he just takes away your freedom very quickly. So I was gagged. I was blindfolded. My mouth was sort of wrenched open with this device so that he had access to it all the time, which is an awful thing just to even sort of say. But there's something when you have your mouth open and you can't close it and it's just locked there, which is just an objectively awful feeling that I find hard to describe. And then he puts headphones on and he's blasting really loud music so you can't hear anything or you don't know where you are. And part of the initiation before we went into the haunt was...
David, hold on. What? Like,
yeah, why are we doing this again? Yeah, why are people doing this?
Yeah. Well, I get this fascination with the edge and the extremes, and I do kind of get it. It's like the 10th level of a mud run. What's it called? Like like
I know those courses.
Mud buddy, or I'm blanking on. I don't know why I'm blanking on it. But then there's like a Spartan race, and then there's kind of the ultra kind of Spartan races stuff under barbed wire, and people, there's just levels. This, and I'm watching you go through it, and I was like, okay, like he tapped out, and I was laughing my ass off, David, when you tapped out, because it was quick now, but as soon as they put that thing in your mouth, I was like, I don't know. It's the ultimate kind of like you said, like a control, manipulation, freedom, autonomy stripped away. And I'm like a school child right now, but can you talk about what happened when you were like about to tap out?
Oh, it was panic that had been building, because in the show it's a couple of minutes, but for a couple of hours he had me in a field doing like yoga stretches, but occasionally he'd just come along and kick me really hard, and you didn't know when the kick was going to come or when you were going to get pushed over. And it's annoying initially, and it gives you a fright, but then eventually it becomes very, very tiring, this sort of slowly wearing you down. And so when it came to that point, and this was with my crew around me, there came to a point where I was going to go alone with him. The cameras weren't going to be allowed to follow, and I'd just be left alone with him to do what he wanted. And that was the point when, when we went, we talked about this a lot, because we knew this point was going to happen in the shoot where he doesn't allow cameras to go beyond the certain point. There's two things. We're making a documentary, so it's not particularly helpful. If you're not shooting it, it's like it doesn't exist, right? So what's the point? But in my own mind, I'd kind of talked myself up, because I sort of thought maybe I can do this and I can be, brave, whatever that word means, and go through with it. But when it came down to being alone with him, my brain just said no. It was just an absolute, I must get the hell out of here immediately. And so I gave the signal. I was released, and it was really emotional. Like I cried and sort of blubbered a bit, and it was just such a relief to be free, I think. And it was panic. It was that idea of being alone with this man with no help, being restricted in that way that I was, that it was just like, can't do this. Because you don't even have a chance. If you want to run, you can't run, because you're just completely tied down. So yeah, I decided that wasn't for me.
And just like in sadomasochism, there's a code word, right? Just like in bondage and or, other kind of more pain meets pleasure sexual experiences, there's a code word that folks will develop, and he gives you a code word, and he honored it.
He did honor it. Yeah, he messes with you as well, because in the big contract, there's this huge health and safety waiver that you sign at the beginning, and it's very performative as well as legally covering his own ass. But
meaning that you could die, you could be maimed, you could lose a limb, you could. You're not going to come out of it. Yeah.
The most terrifying list you've ever read, and part of it in there was like, there is no safe word. So in the back of your mind, you're also thinking, will he actually release me if I give my safe word? So he did in this case. But, you go online and there's a number of Facebook groups that are very opposed to what he does. And there's some pretty horrible stories in there. So I'm surprised that no one has died in this thing. I think there's been a heart attack at one point. But it's terrifying. And it's surprising that it's allowed to run.
Yeah, it is surprising. And two adults can do just about anything as long as they're consenting to their own experience, right? And not harming others. Like, maybe there's a legal mind that can course correct me on that, but that's at least the way it seems in the United States. But all that being said, is I loved this episode. I loved this episode. I loved your series. I don't know when I saw it. It was handfuls of years ago. And
thank
so
you. You just like seeing me in discomfort, basically.
No, because I was putting myself in it. This is the narcissist, right? In all of us. I was putting myself in it. Like, could I, would I? And actually, it's funny. Dark triad, light triad is, I'm playing on that narcissism in this podcast even, is that I'm going to start asking you, like, eventually some harder questions. And my hope is that people are listening and answering it for themselves. Right. So we put ourselves, if we do it well, we can use our imagination and put ourselves in scenarios from an extraction to learn. And that is part of the hope. We don't always have to go get our teeth knocked in to know what it feels like to have your teeth knocked in, and to know how to better position yourself to maybe take it in the chest rather than the teeth. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I think podcasting is a great place to explore that. And I think, also, the way I try and make documentaries is from you're sort of really following me into a situation, and I like to think that an audience can go along on that journey with me. So I'm glad you had that experience, because, that's kind of the idea of it.
Yeah, well done. And so let's flip over to conspiracy theories. When did you first get interested in conspiracy theories? And I'm looking for an age, not necessarily a full story.
Probably when I got the internet, which would have been around 12, 13, and suddenly being able to jump online, read about the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, which was stuff I'd really liked just from seeing them in books. Suddenly I could go online and find all this information. And that very quickly went into, the moon landing, JFK. Conspiracy theories just captured a part of my imagination. And when I was a kid, I was, very engaged by them and excited by them. And then, of course, the X-Files came along, and when I was a teenager, and that sort of solidified things even more. Like, I loved that stuff so much.
It felt, when I was younger, teenage years plus 20s, it felt more innocent. And this could be a bias that I have when I look back and I think about the Loch Ness Monster and UFO sightings and JFK and yeah, certainly there's like the big government aspect to it with UFOs and JFK and other stuff, but I don't know if my experience of conspiracy theories now feels very different.
I think that's really fair. I think and my relationship with them has changed. I mean, that was when I was a kid. When I started writing about them in my sort of role as a journalist, beginning of last year, the pandemic was kicking off, and we had a few New Zealanders lighting 5G cell towers on fire. And I noticed that was happening in Britain as well, and it was happening in the United States. And there was this idea that 5G was somehow going to damage your body in some way. That later combined with COVID conspiracy theories, that 5G was a vector for the virus, all this kind of stuff. And in New Zealand, what I noticed was that it was, a lot of the communities being affected by these conspiracy theories were places that really did need those 5G towers. They needed them to communicate during a health crisis, and suddenly they were being burnt down, which was alarming. So that's just like a really small example of a conspiracy theory today having consequences. And obviously we'll get into this, but conspiracy theories, used to feel lighter and more engaging. The moon landing, JFK. Of course, there are conspiracy theories that, conspiracy theories are real. Watergate happened. So there's that kind of stuff. But then what it feels like today is and certainly here in the United States, there's such a black and white view of the world, and you're in this camp or you're in that camp, you're left or right. And the conspiracy theories have kind of amped up with that to the point where, politically, obviously, there are some different issues that weigh into things, but you suddenly end up with, a bunch of people trying to, and successfully getting into one of your biggest houses of power here, and rioting and that's madness. How did we get here? And that's a question I ask myself every other day.
Okay, let's start at the top. What is a definition or working definition of a conspiracy theory?
Well, I guess it's this idea that people have come together to conspire to cover up the truth in some way. So, a conspiracy can be small, it can be big. And, historically, people in positions of power have been trying to screw over the little guy forever. Conspiracies exist. It's a thing. I think the meaning, though, of conspiracy theory, especially in the last couple of years, and certainly since the rise of something like Q Anon has taken place, has sort of changed its shift. Whereas I think if you spat out the word conspiracy theory, spat out that phrase today, people wouldn't sort of think of that basic definition. They'd sort of probably more think of, here are a group of people that believe something that is completely at odds with reality, and how did we get to this point? I think it means a very different thing now to what it did, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Was it so? Okay, I don't want to complicate this because I want to get into QAnon. I want to get into some of the vaccine stuff. I want to, I want to get into these a little bit more because I'm looking from a distance. So I'm not in QAnon. I don't have a vaccine conspiracy, not announced. Like, I value science, and it's a funny thing when you bump up against somebody that is vaccine fearful or whatever. They're like, you should look it up. It's like this deep fear that they don't want to be duped. And, and that's the phrase, like, look it up, search it up. Like, you would put that in your body? Man, you have not done your research. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, you got to do your own research, right?
You do your own
research. Big
right.
phrase.
It's look it up. So I think that it's like the snake eats its tail, and it's a circular fallacy in logic that is crazy making. And it makes me feel crazy when I talk to a conspiracy theorist until I poke like 3 levels into something, and then the straw man kind of falls down. But hold on, I'm saying all that because I want to ask, like, this is where I get a little confused sometimes. Let's go back to 10 BC, right? So there's this dude running around, Judaism is predominant as a religion. And then 15 years later, 20 years later, there's this person that's changing everything, Jesus. And so are those folks, were they conspiracy theorists that the Savior has come to find out that it's one of the most powerful institutions over the last 2,000 years, one of them? So was that a conspiracy? Were they conspiracy theorists at that time?
No, I wouldn't view the early sort of members of the Christian church as conspiracy theorists. I think, you can believe in a cause, and that's just a belief system that you hold. It doesn't have to play into that. I think what becomes really fascinating with conspiracy theory is that religion certainly comes into it. I mean, in nearly any conspiracy that you poke around and dive into comes down to powerful elites being involved, and those powerful people often being Jewish. There's a hugely anti-Semitic push to a lot of conspiracy theories. It often goes back to like blaming a big bad, and that big bad in a lot of people's minds is often Jewish. That happens with Q Anon. It happens with all the big conspiracy theories, whether you're talking about the Illuminati, the Knights Templar. It all has this deeply anti-Semitic bent to it. You'll often get to that in any conspiracy theory.
Where does that come from? That's new to me.
Oh God, I mean, it's complex, and it comes from a lot of places, but it comes down to, where does anti-Semitism come from, right? I mean, it's this awful thing that we live with that exists, and it's something that fuels conspiracy theory culture. It's I mean, that is a whole other topic that I almost don't feel qualified enough to dive into. But it's this idea that the Jews are always painted as the ones pulling the strings. And I think even a lot of really innocent conspiracy theories will end up going back to that point. And a lot of people talking about conspiracy theories don't know this. It's like they're looking at a surface level, but go deep enough and it gets pretty hateful pretty quickly.
Wow. Okay.
There's also this thing, this other thing, just quickly, and because religion, being raised in a religious home, I do find this fascinating. A lot of, and this is generalizing, which is not a great thing to do, but it's also sort of true. A lot of people that get deep into a belief system, and it is a belief system like Q Anon, who believe that these power, Q is some insider that is dropping this information about this cabal that controls the world. Donald Trump is in on it. He's still president, etc. A lot of these Q believers are also like very religious people, and they have been raised in a belief system where there is this very literal war being carried out between good and evil. It's super simple. There's like behind the scenes, angels and demons are literally having this fight here on Earth. It's like it's very like cinematic and epic and exciting, and it's exactly what these conspiracy theory beliefs tickle. That it's that bit of us that wants to blame our problems and our shortcomings on like a big bad. And I think religion has kind of primed a lot of people to, to believe in the types of language and the types of beliefs that Q holds, that there is this battle going on and that you're a soldier fighting, and we're going to run into Congress because we're here to do battle. And it's that kind of language that is evoked that's deeply religious and marries up to a lot of the QAnon stuff incredibly closely.
Okay, I want to take a quick little break here to talk about Apollo Neuro. If you are feeling the stresses, the pressures of life right now, I think you're going to want to check out how Apollo Neuro might be able to help you out. Apollo's technology trains your nervous system to cope with stress better over time so that you can focus and sleep and stay healthy and productive. So how do they do it? It works by engaging with your sense of touch. So they deliver this gentle vibration to help rebalance your nervous system, helping you feel essentially safe and in control of your stress levels. So I wear it twice a day. After I work out or do something intense, I use it to down-regulate, to relax my nervous system. And then I use it right before I go to bed. And that's helped to kind of quiet my mind and prime my body so I can fall asleep faster. And so if you're interested in learning more, I definitely encourage you to listen to the previous Finding Mastery episode with their founder, with Apollo's founder, Dr. David Rabin. It's loaded. So when you visit apolloneuro.com/finding mastery, you'll get 15% off your purchase. So again, that's Apollo Neuro, the way you spell it, APOLLO, Apollo Neuro, NEURO, apolloneuro.com/finding mastery for 15% off your purchase. And Finding Mastery is also brought to you by Athletic Greens. Even if you've only recently started listening to this podcast, I would imagine by now you know how much I believe in what they're doing. They created a daily green supplement. Again, my absolute go-to first thing in the morning for the last 6+ years. And what they've done for me is to help me get an insurance policy for the vital nutrients that I might not be getting in my nutrition. High quality nutrition, it's one of the foundational components for living life with the necessary energy, that right zest and zeal for challenges that come for those who are interested in the path of mastery. So Athletic Greens, it's part of my morning routine. It's an all-in-one holistic solution. And so it is also lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto or paleo or vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free. It all contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. And right now, Athletic Greens is doubling down on supporting your immune system. They get the game. We're all in right now. They are offering us a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free individual packs with your first purchase when you visit athleticgreens.com/finding mastery. Again, athleticgreens.com/finding mastery to get your free year supply of vitamin D, as well as 5 free individual packs. So right now, let's jump right back into our conversation. What is the central message from or of Q Anon? What is that when you strip it down? What does it get to? The big
That
bad is what I'm not sure I know what the big bad is, because it seems like Q Anon is the big bad. But
yeah, no,
they're not a big bad. Are they a big bad? Is Q Anon a big bad? Or is it like...
No, QAnon refers to a group of believers that believe that Q, this person, is this secretive character that is leaking information about the government. So QAnon is the movement. The big bad really is the liberal elite that is controlling the world and that Donald Trump wanted to fight and bring down. That's why we saw a lot of the, arrest Hillary Clinton slogans that were coming out. It's the liberals, and again, it will inevitably at some point lead back to the Jews being bad. It's we're into sort of pretty crazy territory here. Like, it is pretty mad, and I think the pandemic has probably increased people's stress and worry to the point where they're looking for someone to blame, and Q gives them an infrastructure and a hero in Donald Trump to see a possible way through where things might get better. Of course, they're not going to get better anytime soon.
When you're doing this work, did you reveal to yourself, like, oh my God, I've bought into some conspiracies? And as you're doing the work, you're like, how did I do that? Or have you always kind of been on the outside of conspiracies, looking at them with a curiosity?
I think, early on, I think when I was a kid, I think I found it exciting to think that maybe the moon landing had been faked to put America in a much more positive light, and it had all been shot on a Hollywood set. But that's when I was a kid, I sort of found that stuff exciting. I think as I've been writing about this stuff in the last couple of years, I'm trying to think if there is one that I have. I don't think I've gone down the rabbit hole. I look at everything objectively and slightly cynically, and I think that just stops me from jumping down. I mean, a lot of it is just so, there are levels of conspiracy as well. And if you're talking about conspiracy theorists, I mean, if you take something like 9/11, for instance, not all 9/11 truthers, as they call themselves, are the same. There are some at the less extreme end that would think that that terrorist attack was used as an excuse by the United States to go to war and claim some land and claim some oil and all the rest of it. There's others at the other end that will say, not the other end, just a little bit further along that continuum, that will say, maybe the American government knew that was going to happen, and maybe they didn't do anything about it, and it just sort of happened, and that was used as the excuse. To the other extreme end, where there are multiple bombs planted in the towers, there are no planes, they're holograms, they didn't even exist, and the government orchestrated all this so we could invade another country. So on that continuum, I think if it makes me a conspiracy theorist that I think the United States used 9/11 as an excuse to invade another country, count me in. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe that that there were holographic planes and bombs were planted in the towers. So there are different levels to this belief of conspiracy theory culture, and I think that's an important thing, especially like around any sort of holiday time, if you're meeting with like that slightly mad uncle or unhinged relative, to kind of establish like where they are on the spectrum, so that you're not instantly writing them off, and maybe you can have some sort of shared discussion, because we all are suspicious of power. So sort of see where you are on that continuum and see if there's any common ground and go from there.
Okay, so I would like for you to comment on the psychology of people that are attracted or engaged in conspiracy as a worldview, as a model of modern society. I would like to hear just your findings about that psychology. I'm wondering if it's similar to the psychology around people who join cults, but I'll pause that for a minute. And then I want to get to the practical solutions, because I've read some of your practical solutions to talk to the uncle or the cousin or whomever that is a conspiracy theorist, or that's actually probably not even the right way to say it. Somebody who follows a conspiracy. I don't agree with you. So
Okay.
I think they're so wonderful. Your comments are so wonderful, but I want to double click on those with you. So can you start with like the makeup of people that, organize their worldview around conspiracies or a conspiracy?
Well, I think one thing that is surprising, I think, in a way, is that, they're not a bunch of idiots. Like, there are some incredibly smart, savvy people
That's right.
that can believe some really outrageous things. And I think it's really easy just to go, I'm smart, you're dumb. They're not. They just have gone down a rabbit hole you haven't. And I think, as a general rule, I think people that go down these rabbit holes into conspiracy theory belief have a distrust for authority in some way, and a skepticism, and don't like being told what to do. And that can be a really healthy thing. And I think also when it comes to COVID, I think some of the people that are skeptical of the vaccine and being told that they should get vaccinated, some of those people have a really good reason not to trust the government, because the government hasn't traditionally had their best interests at heart. So, I think that's part of what makes the messaging around this vaccine so tricky, because the government has screwed a lot of people over before. Doesn't mean they're always going to. So I think it's a skepticism, it's a worry about authority, and it's also that's part of it. I also think it's people who feel disenfranchised and want answers to why their lives didn't turn out the way they wanted them to. So you see this in a lot of middle America, I think, and you see a lot of mum and dads joining up to Q Anon, and they've had a tough time, and that conspiracy theory tells them very specifically why they're being kept down and why they're failing, because these huge power structures, some of them, trapping children in basements and draining for adrenochrome, are keeping them down. It might get outrageous, but that whole idea of there being a reason behind their lives not being as fantastic as they wanted them to be is a big part of it.
Super clear. Those are 4 or maybe 5 very distinct variables that would lead somebody to it. And I understand it when you say it that way. And from that, I can understand your position about come from a place of compassion, working with people. The trick for me is, and maybe you can make your recommendation, and then I'll share with you where I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can do that. But so do you want to start with maybe some recommendations, over the holiday seasons or next time you're together with somebody?
Yeah, and I'd love to know, what you disagree with, because I think I disagree with myself sometimes, and I jump between. But no, I think a big thing is not to shut down for one thing. Don't get angry. Try and find a point of shared understanding, as I mentioned earlier. Like, if you're going to talk about a theory, try and find where you maybe have some common ground, instead of just instantly saying, no, you're an idiot, So if it's on 9/11, like, start to talk about how, yeah, like, I perhaps don't trust the government either, but maybe, and just sort of open up the conversation as opposed to shutting it down. Another thing I think is a really good technique is something that I certainly didn't invent, called steel manning, where you kind of go and learn that theory better than they know it themselves. So instead of just like saying, oh, you're stupid, have questions about it, like know their belief system better than they do and question them on it. Like, why, how does this make sense to you? And sometimes, the opposite of straw manning, knowing that theory better than they do and really questioning them about it. If you explain the theory back to them better than they know it, it can start to create some like dissonance in their brain when they hear it back. And something you'll find with many believers is they don't actually know what they believe that well. It's similar with a lot of religious belief. A lot of Christians don't know the Bible that well. They kind of know how it makes them feel and what it gives them. They don't really know a lot about the actual text. They probably haven't read the Bible cover to cover. So it's the same thing with conspiracy theories. A lot of people don't know the theory that well. So if you can like lay it out for them better than they do, and believe me, if you lay out all the details of many conspiracy theories, they do sound batshit insane. That may help to cut through. Those are just, that's something. Steel manning is something I really do stick by. But
so
tell me what you find sort of difficult about dealing with this stuff, and maybe how I've suggested dealing with it.
When you say it the way you just said it, I'm going to sound like a complete like loony bin, like off the hinge when it comes to personal relationships, which so all right. So what you just described is really thoughtful, and from straw man to steel man, and to be curious is how I hear about it. And so there's a healthy space between your sense of how things work and being curious about how they work. And so I totally get it. I like that part of it. My experience has been with people in my peer group and my family is that I know folks that have ascribed well to conspiracies, and they're really smart. So I understand like the straw man effect, and I said earlier at the top, like when you triple click 3 in, like it starts to fall apart. Your point, batshit crazy. When you do it with really smart people, there are other things that they can employ. And sometimes like they'll find the logic that will hold up. Like logically, there can be some things that hold up. To your point, I am not going to spend enough time to go down the rabbit hole that these very intelligent, disciplined, discerning humans in my family and my peer group have done. I don't have that time, energy, nor interest.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The steelman approach doesn't hold up there for me. And so I can use curiosity, I can use thoughtfulness, I can use sound logic, if then, a priori. I can get to some argumentation without arguing about it. And then if I find at some point it turns really personal. And I am telling you, it does not turn personal. It does not turn personal from me. But as soon as you are employing some sort of curious logic, and then frustration happens, and there's a moment of vulnerability because, oh my God, the thing is falling apart in front of this person that I'm trying to convince, that all of a sudden it's like, well, listen, you can't be that stupid, Mike. You can't believe that the government's got your back. You can't believe that you really think that, and all of a sudden, and then, so I'm referencing, so where the person I'm talking about and the point of the conversation. So then I've got to use all of my psychological skills to breathe, but so I don't want to engage anymore. Okay. So you're saying engage and go with it. And I'm saying as a first principle.
No, I agree. I agree with everything you say. And I think self-care is a big part of this as well. And I think
good.
The second,
good.
and you've got to look up to yourself first and not drive yourself bonkers. And I think it's going into it knowing that, look, logic may sow some seeds of doubt that long term may cause change. They say that coming out of a conspiracy theory belief set takes a couple of years. You're not going to snap someone out of it. The best you can hope is to seed a little bit of doubt in the brain that will like slowly set off some dominoes in their own mind that they have to come to terms with. Certain people in Q Anon, certain things went too far, and now we're seeing people start to slip out of that belief system. But you're arguing with a belief system. Logic isn't always going to cut through, because it's like you're sitting down with your 90-year-old beautiful grandma who has this really deeply seated religious belief. She believes maybe the earth is 10,000 years old, stuff that is objectively scientifically doesn't hold up particularly well. You get stuck into her, she's not going to come around with your science that you're quoting at her, because it's at such odds with what she feels and what makes her life worth living in a way, and what makes sense of the world. And it's the same if you're dealing...
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's the same way when you're dealing with like your aggressive uncle who's sort of yelling at you. It's a belief system, and he's invested a lot of time in it and a lot of thought in it. And if you're just sort of coming in and telling him he's stupid, why would he ever believe you? Like, it gives his life focus and drive, and it's given him a community as well, because chances are he's on Facebook and has met a lot of like-minded people that he gets on with. And it's given him, again, during a pandemic when we've all been very isolated, it's given a lot of people a second family, this stuff. It's a bunch of people who all have the same shared language, just like religion. They've got the same heroes, and they've got the same language. If they say a phrase, they're going to understand what it means. It's like a club. It's like a cult. It's all those things that logic around the Christmas table, dinner table isn't going to... It's going to do nothing. So I get you. I just like to think that at some point you can try some of these things and they might start to make a bit of their brain wobble, but you're not going to snap anyone out of it.
And so this is what I've appreciated in my response, right? Is that as soon as it gets personal, and it does, yeah, because there's a protection mechanism at play, and I'm not going to call someone stupid, but when I peck at like trying to understand, there's a defensiveness that kicks up, and as soon as it gets that way, personal, in my mind I think of the great Mark Twain quote, you can't argue with stupid people. They'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience, so, and I'm not thinking they're stupid, but I can't understand the logic in it. And then it gets personal. And then I go, I really appreciate you. And we're just not going to see this one through. And then I'll grin. And then all of a sudden it's like the thing I hear back, I'm thinking of one cousin, is like, well, one day I think you'll see Mike. It's like, oh my God. It's just, like there's just kind of no way through it. I'll tell you a funny one. When you've heard this, right? A family member or somebody says, supposedly the Spanish flu, supposedly they landed on the moon. It's like, oh my God. It's just... You
can see the framing coming in, right? And you can see this battle like impending, like on the horizon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so it sounds fun. It's really not. But I am so you're saying use some logic, curiosity, and just, enough space in there that you're dropping little seeds, because one day it might unfold for them. But while they're in it, it almost feels like there's a shrink wrap that's taken place, and they're trying to pull you into that like vacuum shrink wrap.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can the only thing you can hope to do is seed a little bit of doubt in there. They have to come to that decision themselves, because it's a deeply personal decision they've come to believe in these things. It's not just sort of so-called facts they've read that have won them over. It's an explanation for this terrifying world that they're in. And that's not something you give up lightly. I mean, the fact we're all on this planet and don't really know why we're here, it's like we wake up every day, we don't know how we got here, we don't know what happens when we die. It's fucking terrifying to anybody. And when you add in a lot of the other pressures that are going on, it's not a surprise that people try and reach for these sort of tried and true stories that are millennia old, that there is a big evil force out there out to get you. You know, it's that same storytelling of like good versus evil that plays into this, and it gives you an explanation for things. So yeah, it's big stuff we're talking about, you know?
Yeah, it really is. It's deep belief systems. But how do you get to the flat earthers? Like, I know you've taken a dive in there.
You
So
can't. I mean,
Okay,
flat
thank you.
Earth is. There's no. I mean, you can show a flat earther various science experiments. You can demonstrate to them really clearly that the Earth is not flat. There is curving involved in there somewhere. But again, it's like, you know, I went to a flat Earth conference in New Zealand a couple of years ago. They've certainly made it there. They're not just in the United States. And it's a club. Everyone knows each other. There's YouTube stars there. They've got their own language, their own celebrities, and there's no getting through to a lot of that stuff. And again, you know, flat Earth does most flat earthers are a form of Christian. And there's some wonderful Christians. I'm not saying Christians are all conspiracy theorists, but there is a big crossover there because a lot of the proof they get for their flat earth beliefs are from biblical scriptures and the way that they see the world, with heaven being above, hell being below, and different references in the Bible that was written when people didn't have an understanding of how the solar system was put together. So the religious crossover, it just comes up so much, and I think I feel really strongly about that because of my upbringing and coming up in a upbringing where I was given the answers to things that made me feel like, to be frank, like I was superior to other people. I had the truth. I had the answers. I knew where I was going when I died. I knew that there were these like evil forces going on behind the scenes. I believed all that till I was about 17, and it gave me structure. And I would hear people tell me about fossils and the fossil record, and I just had like I'd just put that in one other part of my brain and just carry on with what I knew to be true because it was way easier, and it came with community and it came with friends. And the idea of dumping that belief was like, shame was an element of it because it's like, oh, I've been wrong about this the whole time. And also you just like lose a culture, like you risk being cut off from various people in your life because of that change. The same thing with a lot of this conspiracy stuff. It's so, you know, you're not going to snap people out overnight, but I like to think that you can try. And at the very least, it like helps your debating skills and helps you to like keep your cool a little bit.
It is good training there. I do like that about it. And so you've seen, you've studied, you've written about some really bizarre, twisted stories about people, you know, in the world. Like you're up on the fringe with stuff, which I love about you and your work. And I'm curious about your view of the future. Are you optimistic? Do you have a pessimistic view? Like, how do you think about the future from a humanities standpoint?
I mean, I am pretty pessimistic, which I think confuses people because I am a pretty upbeat, happy person. Like I'm a happy person. I'm lucky enough that I don't get depressed and I don't suffer from depression. I find things in each day to be excited for. Looking at the planet as a whole, though, I think, you know, I make no bones about it. I'm I guess what you'd call in America a liberal. I'm left leaning. That's just the way I am. I think, you know, I believe in science. I believe that the planet is on fire and we're not doing enough to change that. I think since Donald Trump, in part, sort of instilled this idea that we can create our own reality and that everything that we don't like is fake news. Those ideas are spreading, and I think when we pair that up with the demise of the planet, I don't know how we're going to be able to come together and actually come up with a solution because things are dire, you know, things are on fire, and we're not doing anything about it. We're just sort of muddling on with our own silly little problems here on Earth. So I'm encouraged by the next generation. I think some kid will, if they're going to save us, it will probably be them and not Elon Musk. I'm slightly concerned about where the power does lie in society, whether it's with Mark Zuckerberg and the likes and Jack Dorsey, and the way that we're using social media and the way that we're interacting with each other and what that's doing to us. Yeah, I see a lot of reasons for pessimism and not a lot for optimism. Just here in, Los Angeles, looking at the homeless population and how that is just utterly ignored. It almost comes down to individuals to help come up with a plan, because the government certainly doesn't seem to be helping. And that's just outrageous to me. I don't understand it. I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand why there isn't some sort of universal healthcare system here. I don't understand why when people in America get sick, they have to attempt to go viral on some fundraising page to get medical treatment. Everything seems bad a lot of the time. And so I'm ranting on now, but I feel pretty pessimistic about things, and I don't quite know what to do. I mean, how do you feel about things?
Depressed now that you get to the truth of it. No. Yes. So I recognize much of what you just talked about. And I will tell you that because of what you just shared, there's nothing out of place. That the purpose of my company, and which happens to match up to my life purpose, but we've got a small, powerful team that is squarely anchored in this way. So I'm gonna say yes, and this is how, right? Is that I also have this deep appreciation for just how remarkable the human capability is and how untapped our resources are. I don't think we're using them properly. And so the purpose of my company is to help people live in the present moment more often. And you go, wait a minute, that's not what tech is doing. That's not what, tech is pulling us away from that. Right. And we're also pulling pulling further away from feeling pain. So when you say what you said, I feel it. And when I feel it, I say, oh, I can't sit passively. So I must do something. And so that is, I believe that to be true for most people. And this is where mirror neurons, empathy centers, compassion centers, this is where bonding, relationships, part of the deep history of our DNA and genetic coding is embedded, that we want to do something to help, to help others. So here's the purpose: to help people live in the present moment. Why? Because they'll get to the truth of things. When you get to the truth, you'll access that agency to want to help. And we need each other. So when we get to the present moment, we understand our capabilities, we get to pain, and then we'll want to take action. And we need each other. So then we'll take care of each other, take care of the planet, and then eventually, hopefully, take care of machines. We are running in 9 years' time, David. You're probably very familiar with this. In 9 years' time, we will have a machine that is smarter than every other human. Not put together.
If that's in 10 years, I find that a terrifying prospect, because I think
I do too. We're not ready for a machine to watch us and go, oh, I see how you do it. I'm going to do the way you do it better. Imagine.
Oh,
that.
No, absolutely. Because the second a machine can do it better, there's very little need for us to even exist.
But to me, the scarier point is they can already process faster, but they struggle with feeling and the emotional component, and to learn in an integrated way. That being said, imagine if a computer smarter than the smartest person was observing human behavior at scale and said, I'm going to do it the way you do it. And I'm going to do it a little bit better. I think if they watch the news, if they scrape the internet, if they listen to phone calls, I think that they're going to say, right, greed, okay, scarcity, contempt, jealousy, I think we're going to get into some anger and mistrust. And so then imagine if that computer has another 100 buddies, and then 10,000 buddies, that are just like them. I think we got trouble coming. So we're going to need to love these things. But how do we do that? We've got to love our planet. We got to love people. We got to love ourselves. And it begins with getting in touch with the pain that we're feeling so we can do something about it. It's
Yeah, and
complicated
I
in some
think
respects.
what you talk about. I think acknowledge. I think there is this idea, and I know you've talked about this before about pain being a bad thing to be avoided at all
Hmm.
costs. And I think I agree with you completely that we need to feel those emotions to actually be called into action to actually help. If we just, I think sometimes if people are too happy and too content, they become the most useless meat sacks on the planet because they're just doing nothing. They're content. It's like nothing good is going to come from that. You're just going to become nothing from
We
that.
are
And so,
becoming intolerant to distress. And that's a
mm,
real thing that actually leads to um, unhealthy people is a
hmm,
intolerance to distress. So part of like helping people understand capabilities is to help them feel pain. And I'm not sadistically, but like
not like
tolerate.
Russ McCamey.
No, exactly, right, exactly. But more like, hey, a cold shower or sitting with your emotions, like
Yeah,
labeling an emotion with another person. How about it? Start there.
yeah,
But so all that being said is that I want to ask you a question is that you have this outlook that is bleak, and then you say you don't fall into a state of or an experience of depression. Like, how do you do that? I think that's quite remarkable.
yeah. That's a really good question. I think I mean, maybe this is a problem. I find enough to enjoy and to find wonder in the day to day that keeps me
That's it.
positive and focused. But the problem with that is, and what I think is difficult with this is that's not necessary. I don't see how that can translate to helping a planet that is completely crippled by power structures that don't want to help. And that's my difficulty in all of this, because as humans we're very good at thinking in our own timeline, in our own world. I think we're really good at predicting and looking forward maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe back about 10. Beyond that, we're pretty useless. We don't see patterns. We don't see things that have happened before. We don't know that for um, every government intervention, whether it's wearing seatbelts or the last vaccine rollout we had to have, there's always people that say, no, I'm not going to do that. I want my freedom. We don't remember this stuff. So it's like every new problem we get, it's like we're experiencing it for the first time. And that worries me that we just get so stuck in like just the day to day, whether I enjoy that or whether I don't. And we need to be able to look beyond that for any type of hope of saving the planet. And that's where I think when you're talking about intelligent machines and potentially AI, the one joy in AI is that it will be smarter than us, and if it's on our side, can potentially come up with a solution that we can't, because humans are terrible at coming up with solutions together en masse. Like, we're terrible at it. We can't do it.
So there's your answer. It's like curiosity, and is your anecdote to the bleak outlook, the pessimistic outlook of the
Mm.
future. So curiosity would be it, and then the other part is you're exactly right. Is that we do need something more intelligent to get us out of the mess that we've created, and like if we can not other the machines. And so the reason we would other them is because we're afraid of them. And
Uh-huh.
if we treat them like a stupid adolescent, like, or we treat them like the enemy because we're afraid of them and we other them, they will feel that at some level potentially, and then this thing like flips on its head.
Yeah,
So
we're toast.
yeah, so we really do need to work from our own pain and suffering to be able to understand this agency that is born, that is natural for people. The agency is a natural thing to move in an agentic way out of love, and eventually love self, others, the planet, and machines. I think in that order is going to be pretty flippin' important. But anyways,
I agree.
listen, yeah. Oh, you do? Okay, cool. David, I love this conversation. I love your logic. I love the simplicity of how you lay out an argument and draw right into the clarity of the position and how to string along from thought one to thought two. I love it. And so I feel like I could spend a lot more time with you, but I want to honor your time. Where can people
Thank you.
follow your work? Yes.
Look, I write a lot on a newsletter called Webworm, which is webworm.co. You can sign up for that. There's a free version There's a paid version. You certainly don't have to pay me. All my conspiracy theory writing, I always write for free. I never want it to be paywalled. I do a monthly podcast with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman called Armchaired and Dangerous, where we kind of break down and discuss conspiracy theory culture. I do that once a month. But yeah, I think Webworms, where mostly you can follow my stuff. I tweet, but increasingly I think Twitter is just the worst of society, where we're just breaking really complicated ideas down into very few words, which isn't helping anyone. So yeah, I'm putting more effort into writing these days. And yeah, some of my old documentary work, it's up on Netflix and HBO, so you might enjoy that.
I love your way, David. I find you to be really courageously open and explore, super introspective and thoughtful. There's a kindness that exudes from you. I think you're able to stay wide and also drill in. And as you drill in, you don't get lost in the drilling. It's like it makes sense. There's a framework that you're working from. And I would imagine that people love being your friend because you have you actually, despite the worldview of the future, you have a very positive outlook of people. I think relationships matter to you and you're invested in them. And I think that, you probably run a little stressed. There's a little bit of anxiety that sits underneath of that. And
yeah, there is. Yeah. Stop looking into my soul, Michael.
Oh, yeah. And so, listen, occupational hazard, I guess, but I have appreciated this conversation. So I'm wishing you kick-ass success in everything that you're doing. And if there's a place we can play in the future, let me know. I've enjoyed sharing and learning from you. So thank you, David.
No, thank you. That means a lot. And I think kindness is the one thing that we have to try and tap into. And yeah, curiosity is a good thing. If anything, if you want to stay sane around conspiracy believers that are driving you a bit crazy, just sort of observe them, and it's interesting. It's fascinating, and don't treat it like a battle. Just treat it as a bit of like weird Christmas entertainment.
All right. So say hi to Dax and Monica, and I'm wishing you the best.
I will. Yeah, I'm seeing them next week. I may see them tomorrow for Thanksgiving.
Awesome. Take care. Okay, bye.
Bye.